Warning, some viewers may find the following footage deeply disturbing.
Genius. Hey, this is Kurt Wallace, host of the Kurt Wallace Show on RandPaulReview.com. And we have two awesome guests with us today. We've got Jack Hunter, who's a writer for RandPaulReview.com. And then we have the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, Glenn Jacobs, also known by small circles as Kane in the wrestling world. And thank you both for joining the show today.
Thanks for having us, Kurt. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Kurt.
Well, we want to jump right in and start talking about the current events that are happening right now. Hopefully we can cover a bunch of stuff. We got questions from our community as well. And the hot topic today is the fires in California and what's happening there. And because Glenn Jacobs is the mayor of a county, you manage things like the issues that are happening in California. So would love to get your input on, what you think is happening there, what has caused the problem, and how it could have been prevented.
Sure. I think ultimately the cause, we had some fires that were devastating right outside Knox County a few years ago at the Smoky Mountains National Park, the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And one of the issues is just management of these forests. The environmentalists, management to them means you just don't touch anything, and you end up with all this underbrush, which essentially turns into tinderboxes. Even Native Americans had controlled burns in the areas that they were living in to stop catastrophic fires. So again, this is, I think, one of those situations where you're going to find that the cause, at least as far as the fires becoming out of control like they have, is mismanagement of the wildlands in these areas. And of course, that all goes back to who does a better job of that, government or private property owners? I would argue that it's private property owners. Then the response obviously has not been great. Here in Knox County, we actually do not have a government fire department. The city of Knoxville does, but in the rest of the county, we use subscription-based private company, Rural Metro, and they do a very good job for us. And we also, the utility districts actually aren't under the county. They're a completely different entity. So you've heard stories about, and here too, even though the water is not under my purview, in many cases, it's going to be TVA or the Tennessee Valley Authority or the utility districts. But it looks like it's all, so much of this is just mismanagement at different levels and things that could have been done to prevent these fires from start, obviously, but getting out of control like they have, and then a better response. Of course, the left is, it's climate change. Sorry, guys, that's not the cause. I think that we can probably point to human beings not doing their job very well, and also a system that's very ineffective at dealing with these things.
Jack, what is your thought on what's happening in California?
Well, Glenn's who we would want to listen to the most because of his level of management as a mayor and overseeing and being responsible for citizens and their safety. But my 2 cents is that, when you hear Joe Rogan say, I talked to a Southern California firefighter 2 years ago who said that this was going to happen at some point, that our luck was going to run out. When you have, Donald Trump, the president-elect, saying warnings like this in the past, and then it does, I don't think we should be sensitive to what's going on, the tragedies, people, their plights, always. But it's not unreasonable or wrong to ask questions about, do we not have enough water to combat this because of some EPA thing protecting a fish? That's not to say you don't want to protect the fish, but there's a lot of mayhem and awful things going on in California right now. You should think about those sorts of things. So I could belabor the point, but the larger point I would make is there are a lot of questions that were needed to be asked beforehand. Some people were asking them, they were being ignored, or as Glenn said, it's just about climate change, saying things that aren't true. I think just we need to question in a bigger and better way than we did before to better handle these tragedies. You're always going to have fires like this in California. How do you handle them is the question.
And what are some ways that they could have prevented this issue around the water? There was no water in the reservoirs. There wasn't any water available to put out these fires. Also, there's word that there were arsonists involved in this process. those are some of the questions. I went to the barber today, and she brought this topic up. She said she's from a third world country, and she said, I don't understand what's happening in the United States. How could the one of the most prominent parts of California burn down? How does that happen? She said, my country is an island. It's windy. It's usually between 90 and 110 degrees. It's very dry. We've never had this kind of an incident in our country.
Yeah. All those questions that you bring up are great questions. Ultimately, I think that we will get those answers. When you look at the water situation, as Jack mentioned, it's EPA mandates and different things like that. There's so much emphasis on things like equity and again, I don't even want to make this political because, as Jack mentioned, it's a horrible human tragedy. However, you do look at things like this emphasis on equity. I don't even really know what that means. The DEI stuff; those do have real world impacts. Whether it's the case here or not, I don't know. But certainly, I think that there were some policies that really need to be re-examined. When you are putting the life of fish over the life of human beings, that's a real problem. And unfortunately, with the modern left, they don't seem to have a problem doing those things.
The Trump inauguration, we're going to switch over to the inauguration, which is about to happen. This whole cycle, I've been really interested to hear your take on what's happened over the last year with Trump. He went to New York last week, and he's been set free by Marchand, right? So, what's your take on where we are as a country with Trump? Do you think that we're going to continue to have divisiveness? It seems like maybe a lot of the people on the left have stopped doing that. Trump and Obama were sitting next to each other laughing during having a nice conversation. He's been called Hitler. He's been called all kinds of things, just horrible names. And are we at a point where we could see some healing? And are you hopeful about where we're going at this point?
With the election of Donald Trump and what he's done after the election, the people that he's put in his administration, I think Susie Wiles is brilliant. You have people like Pete Hegseth, the Doge thing with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, that should have been done literally decades ago. So I think that he has surrounded himself with some really good people. I think he's being influenced by some really smart people who are going to pursue the right policies. As to your question about healing and divisiveness, unfortunately, I think divisiveness is just a feature of American politics. That's just how it is. I think that we will see kind of a feel-good period like you always do, and eventually that all comes back. I will tell you, for my perspective, Donald Trump's been through a lot. I have vast respect for the fact that he doesn't have to do this. I mean, seriously, he's a billionaire. He could be hanging out on his yacht. He'd be hanging out in Mar-a-Lago. And he literally went through hell. He was impeached twice, indicted, and basically, they waived the punishment, but still he's going to be labeled a convicted felon by the left for the rest of his life, even though those charges are questionable at best. So I'm pretty excited about what's happening going forward, just with everything that he's been through, the people that he's now surrounding himself with. Unfortunately, I do think that eventually all the divisiveness will come back. And I'll also say this about Trump. He's been much more restrained this time around than he was before. And he's not giving the left so much of the fodder that they had previously when it came to him.
Yeah, it seems politically he's learned a lot over this last there's times that you can say certain things, times you don't.
Right.
What causes reactions, what doesn't, what's really important, what's not in that. Jack, do you have any thoughts? I want to keep Jack included in the conversation here. So jump in at any time, Jack. Feel free.
I would second almost everything Glenn said, but I would add to it, as far as healing and the nation getting better, first and foremost, I'm excited about some of the opportunities. Trump is a disruptor, first and foremost. The people in charge who have been problematic for a long time, I don't care if it's the Pentagon, you're talking about our economy, do not want him there. And that is a good thing.
And I should add, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Those are the people that are going to cause the divisiveness.
Yes.
They're the ones. It's not, you look at what Trump did as far as reaching out to, folks who normally wouldn't be considered Republican voters. He grew the Republican Party in ways that no one else has. But it is the elites of the left and, frankly, of the establishment that'll cause the division. Sorry to interrupt, Jack.
No problem at all. You're absolutely correct. And I was going to add to that, as far as the healing goes, I think that the majority of people, this was a broad coalition that elected Donald Trump. I mean that in terms of racial minorities, more American blacks and Hispanics, Latinos voting for him. Certainly one with independents. Just across the board, it's the sort of multiracial, multi-ideological coalition that you want. Reagan had that. Obama had that. I'm not saying they're exactly the same as Trump, but I think those people are going to come together. We're going to be more united America, but there's going to be this chunk of the left, who Glenn just cited, that have been in control of things, and no matter what Trump does, they're going to hate on it. He could do things that are good from a liberal perspective. The First Step Act, criminal justice reform, there were liberals that hated that. That doesn't make any sense. So there's nothing you can do with those kinds of people. They're going to remain there, and you just beat them. You beat them in an election, you do it again, over and over.
It's amazing to me. You go on social media, you go on X, and you see some of these, I don't know another word, just crazy liberals blaming Trump for what's happening in California. Yeah. He's not even president yet. So, okay.
Well, in terms of this whole election cycle and the shift in what is being talked about, the narratives that are happening, I know that you're a Republican, but you're kind of a libertarian-leaning Republican. And the ideas of libertarianism and the ideas of really limited government, pro-civil liberties, not going out and looking for wars to fight overseas, that national conversation has changed dramatically. And I would say even more radically than any of us maybe even expected, with Doge as a part of that conversation and trying to determine what is relevant in government, what could be more efficient. And I mean, these are really like pie in the sky dreams for a libertarian like myself. So what do you guys think about the possibilities that are coming with the Trump administration, and actually listening to these very healthy ideas on what we can do to restrain government?
I do think that some very good things are going to happen. I think that Trump was serious about. Some folks call it isolationism. That is absolutely the wrong term. It's not interventionism. You can trade with people, you can talk with them. You just don't need to be involved militarily in starting wars. That was driven home to me during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Look, we needed to get out of Afghanistan many, many years before we did, but it also should have been done in a way that protected the people who serve this country. The last casualty in Afghanistan was Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Knox, who is from Gibbs High School right here in Knox County. For me, I just was enraged when I would hear Biden or Kamala saying that no service people had died in combat while they had been in office, because that was a lie. And right here in Knox County, we have evidence of it. But yes, some of these things like that, like hopefully making the Trump tax cuts permanent. Doge, I'm so excited about that. So I do think that a lot of good things are going to happen. Obviously, it won't be perfect. It's going to be a lot of hard work because you have vested interests that don't want to see things change. But as Jack said, and if nothing else, Trump is a disruptor. And he's going to go in there. And I think this time, too, so I'll tell you guys a story. I was at a Trump fundraiser and a private roundtable. And someone asked him, why didn't you fire so-and-so? And he responded, well, you have to understand, I was new to politics. I trusted some people that I thought I could trust. That won't happen again. And I think we can actually see that, with the first administration and his cabinet and his advisors, compared to this one, it's radically different. So I think from someone who is very liberty leaning, I think we're going to see some really good things happen.
No, that's great. Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, the things that he said he was going to do in his first cycle as president, he did a lot of them. I still have some criticism of how he handled COVID he handled the vaccines and that sort of thing, and also injecting a lot of inflationary money into the system. But that's a once in a century kind of event. So
I think, and Kurt, I think he also learned from that. I think if he had it to do all over, we all did, frankly. But if he had to do it all over again, I don't think that he would do those same things. And even that he did follow much more federalism and states' rights policies than many presidents. When you saw Biden go in, it was bam. It was a little different than what Trump did. So I think his instincts are right, and I think what happened though, and it was almost parallel talking points between Trump and Fauci. So I think Trump's instincts are right, but I think basically the bureaucracy just kind of overwhelmed it all.
Yeah, I think that's right. Foreign policy wise, nobody's perfect, but he will do things in foreign policy and domestic policy because he's an unconventional leader. He's not a conventional Republican. He's not a conventional Democrat. He's unconventional, that disruptor factor we talked about earlier. And he's going to do things that all the generals in the Pentagon don't like. We saw that first term. He's going to do things that people in the highest levels of government don't like economically. I can't wait to see Doge get rolling and see what that looks like in the shrieking. Javier Milei, the new president of Argentina, is a mentor or somebody, an admirer is probably a better way to put it. They've met a few times, but he's slashing like crazy down there in Argentina. Inflation is down. Housing costs are down, a great improvement. So hopefully we go in that direction. How quickly or how slowly, I don't know, but I'm excited about what might happen. More importantly, we live in a world now where the president-elect appeared on The Undertaker's podcast hanging out with his brother Kane. And what world did that happen in? That's about as cool as it gets. How many times did President Trump cite you or call you out, or you met with him?
There were a few times. It was pretty cool. And that's never happened before.
Right.
Bringing up a little bit of wrestling, you actually, Jack shared with me that you have continued wrestling as mayor. You've actually gone and done an event that was a bit of a fundraiser. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I first came into office, I already committed to doing an event. WWE had a partnership with Saudi Arabia, and I went there and donated $100,000 to a fund here that helps the families of fallen first responders and police officers and those sort of things. And that's one of the things that's really unique about me, I guess, and about my position, is I can do these things that a typical elected official would never be able to do. And yes, the President-elect Trump he helped promote some of the early WrestleManias, was pretty involved with that. Also, he was involved with UFC when it was first coming to the public's attention and awareness. So it's kind of cool to be able to hang out with the president and talk about wrestling.
That's awesome. And yeah, didn't he slam Vince McMahon on the ground or something?
Oh, yeah, he did. He shaved Vince McMahon's head. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
I would add to that about Glenn, and we've been friends for a number of years, and I don't think a lot of people understand in his role as mayor. As a WWE performer, he has a global perspective that's different than you or I, Kurt, or most people. You've been around the world and seen everything, so many different cultures, and you just have a more comprehensive. People don't think he's a WWE wrestler turned into a mayor. Well, no, there's a lot, and that's great, but there's a lot more to it than that. You've seen everything and all these different cultures and all. I just think that helps you in your leadership abilities and everything else.
Well, and it really helps me appreciate, especially this area here in East Tennessee. We are a very conservative, I would argue, pretty libertarian part of the country, more so than many other places. And I've seen the rest of the world. I've seen what works and doesn't. To me, the most important thing that we need to keep alive is the American dream. It's opportunity, economic opportunity for people to be able to improve their lives. That is what makes America great. That what makes us unique. That is what makes us exceptional. You go to so many other parts of the world, and that's just not the case. Where you are born is where you will die, and that's just a fact of the matter. Here in America, it's different. Obviously we take that for granted, and we shouldn't. I was telling someone today, I was speaking at a group, and sometimes feels like I would like to take people from Knox County to Chicago. And you think we have and we do have issues here. Obviously, everybody does. Deal with some of their problems. But I'd also like to take some folks from America and take them over to India or to wherever around the world, or to China, and to see what life is really like there. And I think that for a lot of folks that realize, my gosh, these freedoms that they talk about that are so important that sometimes we're just willing to sacrifice for whatever reason, for convenience, they're really important. And there are other people around the world who would just die to be able to have the opportunities that we have here in America.
Thank you to the Rand Paul Review community for your support of the Kurt Wallace Show. We are now syndicated on Spotify. For those who are new to Rand Paul Review, become a subscriber today. It's absolutely free to join. Go to randpaulreview.com, put in your email address. You'll receive our newsletter, articles, and podcast interviews. We just ask that you share our content with others. If you like what you're getting from Rand Paul Review and you want more, I encourage you to become a paid subscriber for just $8 a month. You'll receive full access to exclusive articles, behind-the-scenes interviews, and the community chat room. Plus, we're giving away tons of swag in 2025. Annual subscribers get 20% off, so check that out. Whether you're a free or paid subscriber, thank you for your participation and support at randpaulreview.com. What has shaped your view in terms of politics and economics and this libertarian-leaning Republican view?
A lot of it's actually Ron Paul.
Really?
Yeah, it was hugely influential on me. Now, I was already kind of going down that road when I discovered that there was a congressman from Texas that believed a lot of the same things I believed. And that he was the person that turned me on to Austrian economics. I was always intimidated by the term economics. And then people like Ron Paul and Judge Napolitano are talking about Austrian economics. I'm like, what? I mean, I like these guys and I agree with pretty much everything else they say. I need to look at that. And I realized then that economics is not about numbers, it's about people. And obviously the study of human action. So that's been a lot of it, and so just, one thing leads to another. And again, in my case, I actually can compare, as Jack said, since I've been around the world, and I've been around the country, I can compare how different policies work. And I actually get to see it firsthand, and again, there's, I choose to live here because I believe it's just the best place for me. And the reason for that is because these policies that I talk about, what we do here in Knox County and in Tennessee.
Favorite economist, favorite books? What's on your reading list? What's at the top?
If you zoom on the shelf behind me, you see a lot of that. Favorite economists, obviously Hayek, Mises, Rothbard, Thomas Sowell, all the Austrians. Again, Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, John Stossel. So many of these people have been incredibly influential on my thinking. Behind my bookshelf, copies of Human Action, Man, Economy, and State. I've been on a kick lately with inflation and spending, so I've been on X recommending that everybody reads What Has Government Done to Our Money. It's only about 100 pages, but you read that, you understand inflation. It's not a natural phenomenon. It is a monetary policy, which basically, Congress wouldn't be spending all this money. Our fiscal policy is only possible because of our monetary policy. But you understand that inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It is caused by bad policy. And frankly, it's a hidden tax, which hurts people. So I would encourage people to, in your spare time, Austrian economics is not what you think of when you think of conventional economics, but it gives you a much better model of how the world really works and how economics really works than Keynesian economics does, or any other really sort of mainstream economics.
We've talked a little bit about Fauci, and we are on Rand Paul Review. So just hypothetically, if Rand Paul was able to do a wrestling move on Fauci, which wrestling move would you think would be the best one?
All of them. Now, seriously, COVID-19 was incredibly important because it was a microcosm of what happens when the government scares people into submission, and when people are so frightened by something that they willingly give up their rights and their liberties. And Anthony Fauci was one of the main perpetrators of that. Deborah Birx doesn't get a pass either. Fauci was the face of COVID, but Birx was the architect of the response to COVID. Now we know that the lab leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was once considered conspiracy theory, that's probably what happened. The preponderance of evidence shows that was it, right? Fauci was helping funnel money, U.S. tax dollar money, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, with these dangerous gain of function experiments. Rand point blank asked him, gain of function, do you do it? No. Well, again, that was a lie. And basically he played some semantics, say, oh, my people say it's not gain of function. You are altering a natural gene and inserting this furon cleavage site into it so that you take something, the coronavirus wouldn't, in nature, no coronavirus had this furon cleavage site. And that's what allows it to bind to human cells. All of a sudden, there it is, right? And that didn't happen in nature. That was man-made. The hypothesis is, of course, that they were working to develop a vaccine for a disease that didn't exist yet. And that's incredibly dangerous because you saw what happened. I really applaud Senator Paul, not only for his questioning of Fauci and holding his feet to the fire, but for other things like gain of function research and all those sort of things and prohibiting those from being done. I think that's vitally important.
So basically what you're saying is the double choke slam is the...
Again, everything. Yeah. Double tombstone, double pile driver, double power bomb. Yes.
You guys can talk wrestling. I've been watching Jack from afar for many years talk about wrestling on Monday Night Raw and all the things. He's a huge fan, so he can talk the language. But a buddy of mine actually is the one that told me that that's your signature move is Kane.
Yeah, it's the choke slam. Yes. Yeah.
I want to get into something that I think is near and dear to my heart, definitely to my fiance's heart, which is you were a dog rescuer. And I'm not sure how many people know that, but that's a really interesting twist to Glenn Jacobs. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, currently we only have two, and there are our inside babies. We have a little bit of Shih Tzu, and we have about a 15-pound Havanese. And the reason for that is we used to have a farm. We no longer live on the farm, so we don't have the room for all the dogs. But at one point, we had 20 dogs, and they were pretty much all rescues because, what would happen is people would dump the dog on the side of the road. We see it, or it ends up at our house. I meant to pick the dog up and take it to the pound, and then I didn't have the heart to take it to the pound. I was like, we'll just take care of it. So we had the room to do it. But yeah, like I said, at one point we had up to 20 different dogs at the house. Not all inside, obviously. But the thing about dogs is it's just that unconditional love, And I think it was Mark Twain that said, "The more I'm around people, the more I like my dog." And that's the thing about dogs. No matter what, they're going to love you.
Jack, you want to jump in?
No, I just that's something a lot of people don't know about you, Glenn. I'd mentioned to that Kurt earlier. I think that's a cool thing that not enough people know about.
No, that's great. I mean, it's a really cool. We have some questions from the Rand Paul review community. If you don't mind, could you stick around for a few minutes and answer some of them? Okay, so let me jump in here. We've got one of them was about the California fires, and so we've already talked about that. Another one is around the Fourth Amendment that routinely is violated at airports. I'm assuming TSA. This is Donald DeFreeze, and the question is actually, why is the Fourth Amendment routinely violated at every airport in this republic?
Because of 9/11, and that's not the only thing 9/11 changed. You have the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act wasn't so much about tracking terrorist finances, I believe, as really it was about you'd have to fill out all these paperwork and all these different things that have come online, and it's all in the name of money laundering. Well, in the end, the federal government now has a lot more ability to poke and prod into your private finances than it had before 9/11. But I agree that the TSA, the federal government should not have that authority. Most of the airports in the country obviously are municipally owned, so security should either be handled by the municipality, or the airline should contract with the private sector in order to provide security. The thing about TSA, and look, I don't have anything obviously against TSA personnel. And this is one of the things that my mind has changed about since I've been in the mayor seat. Before that, I was like, oh, everybody in government's terrible and corrupt. No, most people in government are actually hardworking folks that are trying to do a good service for their community. It's the system which is messed up, and it's the system which provides just terrible incentives. But the way that, unfortunately, the way that the TSA works is if you're a terrorist, all the protocols. You ain't going to get caught. If you're grandma with a bottle of water, you don't know that, and you're the one that gets caught. My friend, former Congressman Jimmy Duncan, who is one of the great congressmen in history, remember him getting up and giving a speech before the House and talking about how the American people were tired of being poked and prodded. And the TSA hadn't caught very many terrorists, but they'd caught a lot of bottles of water.
All right, here's another one from Justin Vernon. And he says, are you familiar with and this is probably related to, in part, Trump's Space Force and military efforts there, but are you familiar with the classified space program or the classified space programs and the technology that they're currently using?
I am not. And Jack might be able to speak to that better than I can. Tangentially, though, I will talk about one of my Congressman Tim Burchett's favorite subjects, which is I guess UAPs. I call them UFOs. And people will be like, "Oh, Burchett, and that's just silly." No, it's not. The government has information that they won't release that a sitting U.S. congressman can't get the Pentagon to talk to about. Right now, so I don't know, and Tim himself will tell you it ain't about little green men; it's about transparency. And who knows? But if they're not going to release the information, and if they're hiding something when it comes to these things, imagine what else they're hiding. And I think that's a great place to start.
Okay. And Jack, did you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, we on this or anything else, we have a real problem with overclassification. What becomes classified material at the federal level, it dwarfs what used to be called that. Like they just classify everything. I think part of RFK Jr. being part of the incoming administration is he really wants to know what happened with his family. And he probably knows more than the rest of us and has said so, but there's a lot more to be known, and that information could be declassified. So, yeah, across the board, I want to know more about the people trying to shoot Trump. There's more to that. There has to be. That doesn't make any sense. So, overclassification, whether you're talking about UFOs and Tim Burchett's concerns and all the other things I just brought up, it's a major problem, and maybe that could change in the Trump administration.
And the Constitution calls for transparency with the budget, but we have all these black budgets at the federal level, so in many cases, we don't even know what money's being spent on.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And the redacted 9/11 pages as well. All right, this is a little bit lighter. We're going into the wrestling world. Was it hard working with Vince McMahon at first? Did he push wrestlers too hard? Cause injuries is what they wrote, and cause injuries, I would say. Loved watching you and many other wrestlers. Thank you. And that's from Skip Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Skip, for the compliment. Vince wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with. He's a type A personality, and that's just how he is. He was a demanding boss. At the same time, he was always very fair to me. And I'm in the position that I am, not only as mayor, but in my life because of the opportunities that he gave me. And I'll never, ever forget that. So yeah, you worked hard, but it was also your choice. No one ever put a gun to my head and said, Glenn, you're going to do this. Okay. Or else, now, of course I could have lost my job, but that would have been my choice. And I think that's something that's really overlooked in so many of these situations is ultimately it comes down to your choice. No one's forcing you to do it. right? Nowadays, I do think that the wrestlers have it a lot easier. It sounded like it back in my day. We walked to school uphill both ways in the snow, but nevertheless, they just do. It's just the nature of the business, and it's changed.
Mhm.
However, those changes also, if you look from a little before I started until I basically ended my wrestling career, there were a lot of changes for the positive. I mean, when I first started, we didn't even have trainers. By the time I left, we had a full medical staff. Just things like that. The drug testing program is real. And a lot of folks think, oh, it's just something. No, it's real. And I can tell you, top people sometimes got popped and got in trouble for that. In fact, I would argue that WWE's drug testing program was much more stringent than other professional sports, and that was done, really for the safety of the performers. I remember we had a meeting, and we were all going to go through cardiovascular screening, which had never been done before. And one of the guys is like, what if they find something and I have to quit? It's like, what if they don't find something and you die? And again, that was done for the health of the performers. So was it perfect? No. But did things get a lot better while I was there? Absolutely.
I would add, Kurt, as it relates to wrestling and politics, which is a mixture of what we're talking about today. These
Sure.
people in like Hollywood and general entertainment are sort of insulated in their political bubbles and whatnot, and they think we're all Nazis marching under President Hitler, Trump, all that. Those views. Professional wrestling is much more populist than that, and always has been. You're rubbing shoulders and talking to real people across the country, across the world, every day, and you have a better understanding of the climate out there, the temperature, I guess is a better way to put it, than people in other aspects of entertainment. I just don't think that should be ignored or overlooked. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I remember being in a cab in New York City, and the cabbie figured out who I was, and he's like, the coolest celebrities and athletes are golfers and wrestlers.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I see your wrestling picture behind Jack, right above Stan Brand there. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was actually looking around. I'm like, Jack, you better have a picture of
Glenn's
Kane
up there.
on your
Kane's up
wall.
there.
Okay, all right.
And
All right.
four horsemen are very prominently displayed on the wall.
We have a comment from Will B. He says, I was a big fan of Kane. His entrance to the ring was always terrifying with the fireworks. LOL. And I'm glad Glenn Jacobs is continuing to live his dreams. God bless you, Glenn Jacobs. And then,
Well, Kurt, I don't know if getting into politics is living my dream. It's kind of more. Thank you for that.
well, it could be a nightmare, but it could be a dream. I mean, which is harder,
Oh God,
performing
yeah.
or,
Oh gosh, that's a great question.
or managing a county? Yeah.
Sure, they're just different. And I always tease that, one, I took a lot of physical abuse. Now I take a lot of verbal and emotional abuse. But I've had the two greatest jobs that anyone could ever have: WWE superstar and mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. So they're different, and they both have their different challenges, but they're both very rewarding in different ways.
Most important interaction with a citizen of your county?
A while back, I told this story today, actually at the same event that I referenced earlier. A while back, it wasn't a positive interaction, but it was a very enlightening interaction. There was an elderly lady in my office. Now, in Knox County, the city of Knoxville is it's a distinct and separate political entity. Even though it's geographically in Knox County, we don't control the city. They have their own government. They have their own police force. They set their own tax rate, all those sort of things. Now people do pay property tax. If you live in the city, you do pay property taxes to both. But nevertheless, I don't control what the city does. Sometimes people get confused and think I do. I don't. But in any case, there was an older lady in my office, and she was crying. My people are great. So they'd already talked to her, but she wanted to talk to the mayor. And for various reasons, and nothing that I had done, nothing that the county had done, but some state things, as well as the city had increased property taxes, which to their credit, they don't do that often, but they jacked them up, pretty significantly this year. and she was crying. She was on a fixed income. Her husband had just recently died. And her property taxes, because of the changes, had pretty much doubled. And she opened up an envelope which had some money in it. She come down to the trustee's office and paid in cash. And it might have had $50 in it. And that was all she had to get to the end of the month. And she just wanted someone to talk to. So we here in Knox County, I have a lot of people every year. We need to raise taxes. We need to raise taxes. We need to raise taxes. Okay, well, guess what? You can give a donation to Knox County, but I ain't raising her taxes because she can't afford it. Maybe you can. Wonderful, great, more power to you. But it's people like that are harmed. And obviously also, she's the person that doesn't have a voice. She's like the forgotten man of the Great Depression. She doesn't have any political influence, is not a lobbyist, and nothing like that. But she suffered harm because of what had happened. And I just, again, it was very enlightening to me, because all the things that I talk about concerning tax policy and all those things, she epitomized that, unfortunately, in a very negative way.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's very touching. And it's, I think that these are the stories that we don't really get to hear about when the discourse is you're at fault, no, you're at fault. And we don't really get into the human experience and with all the dehumanizing that goes on in politics. So thank you for that. Any last words, Jack Hunter, and any last words, Glenn Jacobs?
I'm just having fun doing this interview with you guys.
Well, I am as well. Just to wrap up, I'm excited about January 20th and Donald Trump going into office. I think that it is going to be significantly different than the first administration was, and I think some good things are going to happen. I'm also just so very thankful that we have someone like Rand Paul in the Senate. Who the ideas that I agree with, he champions those. And sometimes, during COVID, man, it was not easy to do that. And he did it. So I just, to me, I have an eternal debt of gratitude for what he's done, especially through the COVID years.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Glenn Jacobs.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Genius.